Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of On the Beat, brought to you exclusively on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, presented by FanDuel. This is the show where we bring you an exclusive interview with different Bills beat reporters each week to talk about swirling topics of the moment, that crazy comeback game. And on this week's episode, we are happy to have Mr. Matt Parrino joining us from Syracuse.com, host of the Shout podcast and News for Buffalo. Matt Parrino, welcome to On the Beat.
It is great to be here. You are a seasoned professional, my friend. Look at you. Just opening it up with just cachet.
Woo! I'm working the board back here, Matt. I'm working the board. I'm adjusting your sound levels, focusing on your handsome countenance and your hair and your incredible background. Honestly, I'm feeling a little bit lively. I was, worn out yesterday after that. I don't know if that's a game. I don't know what it was. It was a piece of history laid out before us. And I think by now I'm finally recovered. Take me through it, man. I mean, how are you feeling like post-game at the moment when the comeback was going on?
I got out of the stadium at about 5 in the morning, little 4:35, 5 a.m. And just a lot to do after a game like that kind of magnitude, like just going back and going over all the moments of the game, even, right? Like before you talk about it on a podcast or write about it for the site. And the game itself, it's a race, really. Like it's the marathon of the game. There's all these big back and forths. Like the dynamics of it changed so much in that game that for my purposes, putting out a story at the final whistle, you're deleting that, you're adding that, you're deleting this, you're adding that. And at some point you just get to a point where I'm not taking that out. That's going to go in there and I'm just leaving it in this section. And then we're just going to kind of calibrate at the top. But it was fun, man. I know that there's 500,000 Buffalonians that say that they were at the greatest comeback of all time in 93, I believe it was, or I don't know, 91.
Yeah, 93. Well, it was January 93.
Right.
Yeah.
I was there, and I was there with my dad and my two uncles. We were at the top of the bowl, and my dad and my uncle wanted to leave at halftime. As a matter of fact, they both said that they would pay full price for the cab to get home because obviously some drinks had been had. And my one uncle said, "We're not leaving. So you guys can leave, but we'll take another cab. We're not leaving." So we all ended up staying. We were at the top of the bowl. So we were able to look over the top as people were like a scene out of The Walking Dead, people like filing in over the fences to try to get back in as the touchdown started to pile up in the third quarter. And this one was different because that one was a 30-minute kind of ordeal, where this one was really 5 minutes. They were down 15 points, under 4 minutes to go, and that's when they scored that first touchdown. And so it was just so much chaos. Like, oh wow, they're not really out of it. And then of course I did the thing where they scored to get within 8, and I think I ended it with a little bit too little, too late.
Oh,
so
boy.
I got a little bit of old takes exposed, I guess. In the moment, like you're just reacting to all of it.
Everything was in the moment, wasn't it, for that game?
It really was. It really was.
I came into that game, I called it a loss for the Bills, just the challenges in our secondary, cornerback, new safety issues. I just didn't really feel good about the opener, with Baltimore having an axe to grind after the playoff game. So I was kind of like in that, all right, I mean, I don't really expect us to win. But man, when we were getting drubbed, my feelings were like, this is just unacceptable. Mm-hmm. So you get, a little bit of acceptance, but still like kind of a mounting anger. Like, if you, as a fan, you think you don't have much of a chance, but you don't want to get embarrassed. And it started to get embarrassing. And then you're right, like just that, well, one touchdown. Okay, now it almost looks acceptable on paper. Don't look at the film. But then it starts that 5 minutes was just a dead sprint. I mean, it's almost like a blur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what this game really highlighted more than anything was the great power that is Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the same backfield, and what I think both of those guys not only mean for each other, but for that offense and how hard it is to deal with that group. And there's this juxtaposition to Josh Allen, who doesn't have any of those superheroes in his offensive huddle, that ends up throwing the cape on and going out there and leading the charge and the comeback and lifting guys that, like, I know we're all talking about the breakout game of Keon Coleman, but the conversation around him over the summer was anything but that. I mean, I think I was one of the people on the beat that was a little bit higher on Keon than most. But he made huge plays in the fourth quarter, and Josh Allen trusted him to make those plays. I think it was 4 targets, 4 catches for Dalton Kincaid. So when he found him, they made plays together as well. And I think it was ironic in that game against that team that Josh Allen did what he did to beat that team, almost kind of re-emphasizing, I think, a lot of the voters' feelings on why he was deserving of the MVP to begin with. Because when you're talking about most valuable player, how can you pick between Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on that team? Because they both were just absolutely electric.
Yeah, they're monsters. And you're right, that combo. And when they subbed in the running back behind King Henry, and I can't remember his name, and I will call him King Henry.
Yeah.
It doesn't look the same. And I love your point about Keon Coleman, right? You know, I think the 2-part story here, that he had a great camp and you go to him and you trust him, but also having that type of game in the opener, it just boosts your confidence. You know, every guy, I don't care who you are, and this is kind of a player perspective. You know, you can come in with all the swagger in the world, Matt, and think you're a world beater, but everybody always has this, you know, where's that moment where I realize I belong here? And now that Keon really, that moment happened in game 1, I think that really propels him. And to your point about Josh Allen being the MVP, it's like he's connected with Keon Coleman, but that's not like he's forgetting about Shakir and Kincaid and Palmer. And he just really beautifully worked the offense. And that sort of brings me to a conversation I want to have with you about in the first half. And I never like to say the play calling. I always want to think, like, what's the strategy? I was a little bit lost with what Joe Brady was calling in the first and second quarter. What was your kind of take on that?
I agree. And I almost would even fast forward to the end of the third quarter when they were down the 2.5, 3 scores there, whatever it was. And he comes out lackadaisically, calls a run play right before the quarter. It's like, you want to see some urgency and maybe some, you know, understanding of the circumstances. Your defense is getting absolutely crushed and the points are mounting on the other side. And so figuring out a way to maybe stay in the race, you know, and being aggressive. And so we talked to Joe Brady about this yesterday, and he said one of his big points of emphasis is he doesn't call a game based on the situation. Like, he almost takes the score out of it, and he wants to play the same way and work through their problems and figure out a way to kind of get the offense going. When you have a 3-and-out or 2 3-and-outs like they did in the game, it sometimes stymies the group for a while, and trying to figure out a way to get it back going. That's the challenge. They did that. But at times I do agree, like, it's this double-edged sword. On one hand, you really like the physical mentality of the offense, how they're a very run-oriented culture. But at the same time, sometimes game scripts should force you out of your identity a little bit when you have Josh Allen and you saw what he could do in the 2-minute drill. And even Sean McDermott talking about the fact that that's where he's most comfortable. They do those drills in practice every single day, every week throughout the entire summer and the entire season. And that's where Josh Allen thrives. And so I think maybe because you know you have that in your bag, you're afforded the luxury of operating that way, but it's a dangerous game to play in a game when you're down 2-3 scores.
Well, and I think you bring up a great point, right? I mean, that makes sense if you're down by 10 or you're down by 13. I looked at it and I was like, you know, time is slipping away a little bit. There has to be an urgency of the type of play calling that you make, but it's a great point. And I love how Joe Brady approaches it, right? looking at it as a whole and deciding, well, we still have to work on these things, but at some point you might want to depart from a little bit more conservative when you're down by 15, 18, 20 points. Everybody listening, you're listening to On the Beat on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by FanDuel and powered by the Believe Network. I'm talking to Matt Parrino right here about his experience here at the Highmark Stadium. The Bills come back and beat the Baltimore Ravens in epic, historic fashion. Matt, I want to ask you a little bit. I know you get access to the locker room after the game, and you said you got out of there at 5 o'clock in the morning, probably still a little bit on cloud nine. Talk to me, give me a little insight about the locker room and the celebration or the relief that you sensed in that room.
I think cloud nine is the greatest way to set it up, because you take a guy like Joey Bosa, who's seen pretty much everything on a football field, right? He went to Ohio State, he's been a top tier pass rusher in the NFL for almost a decade. And to see a guy like that, who's coming over to a new team, talk about the fact that he feels like he's still in a dream and that he's never been so happy after a win in football. It's like, and at the same time, there's not this giddy surprise. There was for rookie tight end Jackson Hawes, who said that I'm still in shock. Everybody was celebrating, and he said I was on the sideline and I was just kind of but the majority of the room, the Deion Dawkins, the Spencer Browns, the Ed Olivers, the Christian Benfords, this is old hat for them. They never feel right or wrong. And maybe and this is something where, I know it's in the news the last couple of days, when former players and non-players are on a media platform talking about, the game, and obviously the whole situation with Ryan Clark and Peter Schrager. There are certain things that you can't understand if you didn't play the game. I truly believe in that. But I think what you can appreciate is in these moments, everything that these guys have seen and been through really leads them to their reactions in all these moments. And, the other thing that stood out to me was Josh Palmer, who was also with the Chargers, talking about Josh Allen's demeanor on the sideline during the comeback attempt. You would have never been able to tell they were down, they were up. It was the middle the whole way. And it's I am so amazed at the evolution of him as a player, but what he has in his arsenal. You think back to early in his career, and we used to talk about the quote unquote sugar high Josh, right? We'd go out there and be playing with his hair on fire and running over linebackers. And now in the toughest of moments, he is able to not only deliver from a playing perspective, be perfect. He didn't turn the ball over at all. And I don't even know if there was a turnover worthy play, all while being this calming presence on the sideline for his entire room. It's he has reached an elite level of competition that very few people on the planet ever reach. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great insight, man. I love that. And the thing about that, or the aspect of that people don't grasp, is you really have to thread the needle as the quarterback. You're a leader, but you have to have some emotion, but you also have to have a certain amount of restraint and confidence. You can't fly off the handle. And I think Josh, particularly in this game, really threaded that needle beautifully. No one ever really looked like they were in a dead panic. I for one had to look at the film yesterday for my show, the Off Tackle Show, where I bring up a few clips, and I appreciate what Keon Coleman did, what Josh Allen did, what Ed Oliver did on the field, Dorian Strong's performance. Anything specific that you see? Because I have a couple things about what were disappointing aspects of the game for you.
Well, I think we saw the fact that Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop weren't on the field together at all in the preseason. I think from a just prepared standpoint and the importance of that communication process back there, we saw that play out. It felt like both guys were just maybe a little bit of a step behind on a lot of what was happening. And listen, the Ravens put you in that kind of spot, right? They were going a little bit of hurry up at times. When one bad play happens, I almost feel like it becomes an onslaught. And it's not just those two guys. I thought the linebackers probably didn't play as well as I think you would have expected those guys to play. I thought Terrell Bernard owned it immediately after the game. And then yesterday, Bobby Babich even talked about like for Terrell, like not his best game. And I thought that was, sometimes they like try to like coach speak it up and take some of the pressure off of those players. Like Terrell Bernard just signed an extension. He's a captain on the defense. Like I think you need him in that game to play bigger, to be a little bit more impactful. And whether it be like, getting to the gap a little bit sooner to help pick up, your defensive linemen that are taking on double teams. Like I was critical of Daquan Jones, but I went back and watched it. And I think that the second level could have helped out in some of the gap responsibilities a little bit more consistently throughout the game. And again, that's coming from a film novice, just like watching the game back and seeing where they maybe could have, because that's the thing with Derrick Henry. You let him get to that second level or that even the line of scrimmage untouched and downhill, you're almost done. Even if you do put a hit on him, it's going to run through you.
Yes, he does. Yeah, I talked about that last night too. The way to stop Derrick Henry or Sunday night, you got to make him bounce, or you have to get penetration, like Ed did on that one particular play. You can't let him hit the line of scrimmage with his shoulder square. And you're right, by the way. Great point about the defensive front. They weren't bad. It was really the second level at linebacker position where they weren't hitting their run fits properly. And, woe to any safety that has to bring down King Henry at the 12-yard mark. So I couldn't agree with you more. I had to focus quite a bit on the trenches, just for my show in particular. And I was not impressed with our offensive line play. Both sides of the ball did not play with the viciousness and tenacity and excitement that I wanted to see from both sides of the ball. But I felt like the Bills' offensive line really kind of underperformed. Dion, I think, had a very mediocre game. The inside three they were assignment perfect, but they just lacked that kind of viciousness that we saw late in the season last year. I thought Spencer Brown was okay, maybe the best of the five. And it seemed to me, and it's hard to say, is this a function of not playing any preseason games, or I don't know what it was. It just seemed like neither side of the ball in the trenches was quite energetic enough for me.
I think that's part of it. I worry a little bit about Spencer Brown. That he said everything's good with the back, but when you miss that much time in the offseason with that and trying to work, core muscles and getting yourself back to a place where you feel like you could compete, it felt like times late. And I didn't talk to him after the game, so I can't bring you any perspective from him, but it felt like he was laboring a little bit at times. And so you wonder, like you're playing that kind of shootout, you're on the field quite a bit. There's a lot of snaps there. If that's not something, and they weren't able to run the ball and consistently, at least they had a couple of nice runs, but really where James Cook impacted the game the most was on that big, long passing play that he had. So I think that identity wise, they're probably going to go back into the film room this week and really figure things out. I also think going into the game, I thought that the 13 personnel, the new usage with Jackson Hawes in the mix could be something that really catches the Ravens by surprise. They didn't lean into it as much as I thought they could have, but I also think when you're starting with a new personnel package and you were so successful with the one that you basically left behind you, Alec Anderson was on the field for only 3 snaps in that game. And I asked Joe Brady about that. He said it's going to be very matchup specific over the course of the season. But I went back and looked at his snap counts last year. 1 of 17 games did Alec Anderson have 3 snaps, and I believe that was in the game that he got injured. So he was a much more bigger part of setting that violent tone that you're talking about. And when he wasn't out there, I feel like maybe they could have used him to get the physicality going a little bit more. And then maybe try to pivot to the first drive, the script. Brady had them. It was like line changing in
beautiful.
hockey.
Yeah.
I'm watching them come on and off the field. Like they're just trying to confuse them. They're trying to give them different looks. And then it almost feels like they settle in and they don't do that as much. So I would wonder if you can somehow, and you could speak to this much better as a player, how difficult is it to sustain that kind of personnel shuffle over the course of 60 minutes?
Well, that's a good question. And having not been a quote, skill position player, you generally tend to ignore a lot of that stuff, right?
Mhm.
But I think as a programmatic type response to that, I would say it's all about process and practice. So if you do it well in the first drive, you have to think you can continue to do it well. I don't think anybody gets tired as long as everybody's where they're supposed to be on the sideline and you get the call in quickly enough, then you can make those changes easily. I don't think they got away from it for fear that they would have alignment or motion penalties or anything of that nature. I think you're right. It's all about kind of like establishing an identity. And then, as Joe Brady said, maybe there were things that he just wanted to work through, which I kind of agree with, but I kind of don't. But, the identity of Alec Anderson is that guy who's kind of a bully. I think, to be fair, him coming off the meniscus a little bit, and that meniscus is a little slice of tissue, and they're probably waiting on that to heal a little bit more. But Matt, honestly, talking about identity and a slice, I mean, Anchor Bar history, man. Have you been to the Anchor Bar recently? It was founded by Frank and Teresa Bellissimo in 1935. Initially specialized in Italian cuisine, pizza, and pasta. The restaurant gained national acclaim when it invented the original buffalo chicken wing in 1964, becoming a local treasure and a must-visit for food lovers. When people go to Buffalo and they ask me where to go, I say, you got to at least go to the Anchor Bar, get those epic wings, see history. You have to go. The pizza's great. The wings are excellent. They've got so many different sauces. I can't even tell you. The sauce options are unlimited. They have 17 locations around the country now, franchising. I know there's one opening up in Raleigh. There's one opening up in my hometown of Tucson, Arizona. Can't wait for that. It's going to be a Bills backers location. So if you want history, if you want great wings, head on over to the Anchor Bar. Thank you for sponsoring the Overreaction Buffalo on the Beat podcast with Matt Parrino of Syracuse.com. Matt, this has been a great conversation. Really enjoying your insights. What you guys can bring to us, you in particular, and the way you phrase everything, it just kind of gets my juices flowing. I want to transition a little bit here. How happy were you to see the rest of the East lost? And if you're paying attention to other games around the league, what kind of popped out as a surprise to you?
Yeah, I think for the East, it kind of held up to my preseason expectations. I thought the Patriots might come out a little bit more on fire, but one of the things I'm a little bit conflicted on the Patriots because they go out and they sign Stephon Diggs, and I followed Mike Vrabel for years when he was in Tennessee, and I thought he did a really good job of running the program there, and it feels like there's a level of annoyance and stress that he's dealing with being back in New England that I don't think that bodes well for what they're trying to do there with a very young quarterback. Now, they'll probably figure it out. He's a good coach. Josh McDaniel is a seasoned offensive coordinator, and I like Drake May. But I thought that was a game that they probably should have been a little bit more competitive in. And I think you do run into the problem, too, now with Stephon Diggs there. Not the player that he was a couple years ago, wasn't even before the injury, but certainly not after that. You almost have to, feed that ego a little bit. And I almost feel like that experience with Diggs really gave birth to this whole new identity that the Bills have and the everybody eats mentality to kind of get away from having to feed singular egos and, go that way.
And also, I agree with you. That's a great point. But it also, it elicited this cohesiveness, right? So as things got more erratic with Stephon Diggs around and you looked at it and guys like Josh Allen and Deion Dawkins, man, they just want to be cool. They want to be chill. And when you have this lesson learned, then you are actively trying to grow a culture and a cohesiveness in the locker room. So yeah, that's a great take on that, Matt. I love it. I personally have very low expectations for the Dolphins, and I was pleased to see them get absolutely drubbed by the Colts. I'm pretty excited for Daniel Jones, right? I mean, went to Duke. My boys go to Duke. You kind of follow people that or hear of in that way. The Dolphins, is it a hot mess? Like, I just get the feeling that it is.
Oh, without a doubt. And that goes back further than, for me, the real alarm went off with that whole Tyreek Hill situation at the end of last season, but it goes back even further. Remember when the Dolphins were on in-season Hard Knocks? And I don't know if you caught any of those episodes, but just watching Mike McDaniel in front of that locker room, like during meetings. I mean, we didn't get a ton of that in the Bills Hard Knocks, but like the way that Sean McDermott commands a room compared to the way Mike McDaniel did not, I felt like, and listen, it's a little bit different when the bullets are flying late in the season and you're not having the season that you had. So I respect to that part of it, but there's just something about when you have to be a leader of men, that many men in a room like that, and you can't, that's always been baked into my expectations of that Dolphins team. And then I also think that Tua is a little soft.
Yeah,
like
I was waiting for your adjective, Matt. No, I'm good with soft.
He's just like, and I'm playing aside, it's like he always feels like he's got to defend himself, and he's got to, like, if somebody critiques something of him, he's got to come back and like almost act like you're just out of your, like somebody asked him about turning the ball over in bunches. Guy, that's what you've done your whole career. When you turn the ball over, you do it. Your nickname is Tua Turn the Ball Over. And when you get that nickname, you get it because you turn the ball over in bunches. So why are you pushing back at that narrative? The best in the league, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson to a degree, Tom Brady, more than anybody, it's on him. You're going to put it on yourself when it's not going well. And, to me, he's a kind of an excuse maker a little bit too. And I think that from your quarterback, that bleeds through the whole organization.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I love your comment about McDaniel. I think about ways to lose the locker room, right? And he has lost that locker room, and that typically leads to a head coach losing his job when you don't have the locker room. But how do you own the locker room? And just like Josh Allen, we talked about in the final 5 minutes of that game, you've got to thread the needle as a head coach. Players are different than they were 30 years ago when I played, and ruling with an iron fist does not work anymore. But then also just being the buddy guy, that doesn't work. You have to balance that, insight, like Marv Levy. You listen to Marv because you never knew when the next thing out of his mouth was going to be something just incredible, whether it was historic or insightful at the moment. But Marv never raised his voice in the meeting rooms, but he commanded that meeting room and he demanded the respect, but he also respected the players. I think you're right. I think Mike McDaniel's kind of lost that. Just kind of Drake May, I think the talent's there, but what an ugly game with only 6 points in the last 3 quarters. And lastly, the Jets, and I'm glad this is the last one, right? Because the Bills go to New Jersey to play the Jets this week, and the Steelers with 17 points in the fourth quarter versus 6 for the Jets take the game 34-32. What's your take? I had the Jets as more of a hot mess than the Dolphins, but now it seems like they've switched positions.
I think what we're seeing is an organization that understands where you need to build your team. On the defensive and offensive line, it's got to start there. They have 2 first-round tackles, and I'll tell you right now, it's only one game. Armand Membu at right tackle for the Jets, he's a legit, real deal kind of player. I think Greg Rousseau, Joey Bosa, they're going to have their hands full on that side. Now, on the other side, Olu Fashanu, the first-rounder from a year ago, not as good. He gave up 6 pressures in the opener, gave up a sack, but the way they've built it, they've spent assets on their offensive line, and they've brought in some pretty good veterans. They landed on a kid, Myers, who's at center there, that played a really good game. And then on the other side, they got an all-pro in Quinnen Williams and a burgeoning star in Will McDonald, who's another first-round draft pick from a couple of years ago. And then obviously Sauce on the outside. But they're almost the opposite of the Bills build, where the Bills have a collection of like really good players. And I'm talking about like a dozen to a half dozen players. You got about 4 or 5 all pro caliber players on the Jets, but then everywhere else, there's big question marks, especially in the secondary. Outside of Sauce Gardner, everywhere you look, the slot, they have Brandon Stevens playing at the other corner spot, both safeties, big plays from Aaron Rodgers, who didn't even look like a competent passer last season in New York. He's attacking at the second and third level in the fourth quarter, to your point. So the Jets are fun. And I also think this is a really good game for the Bills because you go right from Lamar, Derek to Justin and Breece Hills, Justin Fields, and it's obviously a lesser duo, but they do similar things. You're gonna have to, defend the zone read. You're gonna have to defend a lot of the running game from Justin Fields in this game. But I will say, I went back and watched that game. He puts the ball in jeopardy quite a bit. He takes some chances that he probably shouldn't. That's probably why he's on his third team in 5 seasons. This is going to be a fun game. The Jets always play the Bills tight, it feels like, over the years. So I think this could ultimately be a good game.
Yeah, it's always a barroom brawl when we play the Jets. It's Dion's nemesis. He gets up for that game. I think you're right. Breece Hall is just such an incredible running back, and he's kind of in between like a James Cook and a King Henry, where he does have some physical ability, super fast, but he's also pretty slick. He moves a little bit better in tight spaces than Derrick Henry. Justin Fields is a little bit scary, when he tucks the ball and runs. Yeah, if you go back and look at the Ravens in the first couple quarters, when Lamar pulled the ball and ran, we squeezed a little too much. Joey Bosa, it took him 2 times at fail, and once where Epinesa just bought it hook, line, and sinker, where, when these guys are this athletic and you're on the backside of it, you can't squeeze all the way down. You got to take a 1-step squeeze and make sure that ball's not peeling out the back. It'll definitely be a big challenge, I think, handling those two, considering the type of film that we put up from just Sunday, right? I mean, that's the Jets are licking their chops, saying we can run the ball on these guys. And then on the other side of the ball, I think you're right. Now it's Joe Brady and Josh Allen who have to look what made Aaron Rodgers so successful. Like, what is it? What are they going to give us? And really take advantage of that second and third level with a secondary that's somewhat compromised. I love it, Matt. Matt Parrino here on The Beat with me, John Fina, on the Overreaction Sports Network. We're coming to the close of our show here. Matt, your insights are great. You can find Matt at Syracuse.com, host of the Shout podcast and News for Buffalo. Really great insight, Matt. Really great conversation. Thank you for, humoring me, going through the division and getting your insights on the Bills. And we're going to shut it down now. You got any last comments for our listeners here?
No, I mean, I'm glad football's here, man. Like, we spent 9 months talking about the what ifs, and now we get to talk about the what happens. These are some fun shows, especially coming off of a game like that. Headed down to New York this weekend, New Jersey, excuse me. To cover.
Thank you for getting it right. It is the New Jersey Jets, and Buffalo will be in New Jersey. I don't have the start time of the game on me right now. I think it's 1:00. Don't forget, you got Jerry Ostrowski, his show tomorrow night. On Saturday, we have the walkthrough with our guy, Anthony Marino, pardon me. And then we added a new show, Matt. I don't know if you know, but Dan Freddy is going to be running our betting show, give you tips and insights on where to put your money. Don't forget to catch Jerry Ostrowski, the Big O Show, tomorrow. He's going to look at the Jets a little deeper than Matt Parrino and I. But for me, for Matt, for Jerry O, for Joe Miller on the Overreaction Buffalo podcast on The Beat, I'm John Fina. Thank you for joining me. And I'm going to close it out, Matt, and I'm going to say, go Bills.
Thanks for having me, brother.